Hello students. So this is the third presentation in this series of basic concepts of chemistry. Let's start. In the previous presentation, I had discussed about atoms, elements, compounds, molecules, etc. So I am just revising this thing because this is very important. I'm sure you know about all these things, but still. So atom is any smallest particle of an element which may or may not be capable of independent existence. So whenever we talk about an atom, we will be talking about elements. So this. Ions are the species which possess some charge because of increase or decrease in the number of electrons in those respective atoms. Molecule is the smallest particle of an element or compound which can exist freely. It is basically a combination of two or more elements which are combined chemically. They can be same elements or they can be different elements also. So whenever we are going to talk about molecules, we are going to talk about compounds. I had referred about differences between mixtures and compounds. So I have kept this slide. You can keep it and you can even write it if you want. This is going to be important. I have discussed this in the previous presentation. If you have any problem, you can go back to that. So we'll just now, in this presentation, we'll be discussing about properties of matter and their measurements. Now, whenever we talk about properties of matter, there can be two types of properties of matter. One can be physical properties and the chemical properties. So, physical properties are those properties which can be measured or observed in a matter without changing the identity or composition on the substance. For example, mass, volume, density, anything that we can measure is a physical property. On the other hand, chemical properties are those in which a chemical change in the substance occurs. And to know or to understand that chemical property, we have to bring about that chemical change, or maybe let that chemical change happen as a result of some reasons so that we can observe the chemical properties. In this presentation, we are going to only the physical properties. So the quantities like temperature, pressure, concentration, work, force, anything, any quantity that can be measured is called a physical quantity. And the standard reference which is chosen to measure that particular physical quantity is called a unit. So this is the basic simple definition quantity. Now there are 7 basic physical quantities on which the international system of units is based, and the symbols and the quantities, their SI units have been shown in this table. So I'll just read it out for you. So length is a physical quantity which has an SI unit of meter. You will have to memorize these SI units because these are very important. I'm sure you know about them already. Mass has an SI unit of kilogram. It's written as kg. Time is measured in seconds. So we can measure mass in meter, millimeter, centimeter, kilometer, anything. We can measure length in meter, kilometer, anything. But the SI unit is going to remain meter. But that doesn't mean we cannot measure it in any other unit. So that's just the SI unit. Similarly, a current is measured in amperes. Thermodynamic temperature is always measured in Kelvin, but we can measure temperature in degree Celsius, Fahrenheit, etc. Amount of substance is always measured in moles. 1 mole is equals to 6.022 into 10 raised to 23 molecules, which we'll be learning in this chapter itself. Luminous intensity has an SI unit of candela, and these are the 7 basic physical quantities. We are also going to look upon just the definition of these 7 basic SI units. So kilogram has been defined as the mass of platinum iridium cylinder that is stored in an airtight jar at the International Bureau of Weights and Measures in France. So there is a cylinder whose weight has been taken as the basis for 1 kgs. The reason platinum iridium alloy is taken is because it is highly stable, it is highly inert, and it does not change its chemical composition over a long period of time. So that particular amount of weight is 1 kg. Similarly, meter was also defined as the length between two marks on another platinum iridium bar kept at a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius. Okay, so also it has been now redefined as the length of the path traveled in vacuum during an interval of these many, 1 by these many of a second. So it's a very complicated figure, but you can, I think, go with the first definition also. There's no problem in that. So second is the duration of these many periods of radiation corresponding to transition between two hyperfine levels of the ground state of cesium-133 atom. So this definition, I would want you to memorize it just like this right now, because I'll have to explain you the hyperfine splitting of any atom first so that you can understand this definition. If you have a problem, I'll make you explain it to you when we meet. So just let it stay like that. We'll discuss it. Kelvin is taken as equal to the fraction of 1 by 273.16 of the triple point of water. Ampere is the constant current which if maintained between two parallel conductors of infinite length of negligible circular cross section and placed 1 meter apart would produce these conductors and equal to 2 into 10 raised to minus 7 Newton per meter of length. These are very specific definitions, so there is not much to explain in them, but still, if you want, we are going to keep a separate class just for the sake of understanding these physical quantities and their definitions, so don't worry. The mole is the amount which contains as many elementary entities as there are atoms in 0.012 kilogram of carbon 12. There are, of course, simpler definitions to all these units, and I'll explain you to them also. So mole is basically 6.022 into 10 raised to power 23 atoms, ions, molecules present in any substance, but that we'll catch up on later. Again, candela is the luminous intensity in a given direction of a source that emits monochromatic radiation of these many hertz frequency, and that has an intensity in that direction of 1 by 683 watt per steradian. Okay, so I'll this. Measurement of these physical quantities is also very important. So to measure temperature, we have three scales: degree Celsius, degree Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. Kelvin is the SI unit, but we can always interconvert any of these units to any of the desired units. So I would want you to remember and memorize all these formulae, because you will always have mathematical small questions of 2 or 3 marks in your exams just for the interconversion. Okay. So volume is always measured in length cube. So it is mostly expressed in the form of meter cube. So centimeter cube is always equivalent to ml. Decimeter cube is always equivalent to liters. Meter cube is the SI unit of temperature. Again, all these units are interconvertible, and I would want you to have a look on them. Mass is always measured in kilograms, and of course we can for smaller units we use grams, and 1 kg is equals to 1000 grams, and so on. The milligrams, milligrams is also used for even smaller units, and we can always interconvert them. Derived units have their name kept from the fact that these units are derived from the 7 basic physical quantities, so that is the reason they are called derived units. These are the commonly used derived units that in our daily lives, so this is why I have kept this table. So area is length into length, so square meter is the unit. Volume is length cube, so it is meter cube. Density is mass by volume, so it is kg per meter cube. Velocity is distance per unit time, so it is meter per second. So if you remember the units for the 7 basic physical quantities, it will be easy for you to remember the units of your derived units. And of course the definition you will have to know, because you need to know first that velocity is distance upon time, only then you can put it meter per second. So that's how you have to do it. Acceleration is speed change per unit time. So meter per second is speed, per second is time. So meter per second square is acceleration. Force is mass into acceleration. Its unit is Newton, and kg meter per second square. So kg meter per second square is called Newton. That's why we call the SI unit of force is Newton. Pressure is calculated as force per area, so it is always Pascal or Newton per meter square. So I can always put it as kg meter per second square per meter square. That makes it kg per meter per second square. Work or energy is equals to force into distance, that is equals to joule or Newton meter. Frequency is cycles per second, which is measured in hertz. Hertz is equivalent to per second. Electric charge is calculated as current into time, which is called coulomb. Coulomb means ampere is the current and into time is second, so ampere second. Potential difference is always measured in volts, so volts is joule per coulomb. Okay, I want you to just focus on this and remember it like this. So volt you can write as maybe V is equals to joules per coulomb, so that you will remember what is coulomb, you will remember what is joule, so you can always come up with this formula. Electric resistance is potential difference per current. It is measured in ohms. Ohms always stands for volt per ampere, because potential difference is volt per current. And last is electric conductance. It is the reciprocal of resistance, so its unit is going to be reciprocal of ohm, so it will be ampere per volts. I hope this is clear. Now there is a small topic of laws of chemical combination. These are the laws which actually govern how a chemical reaction takes place, and how a change in a chemical change that is brought in the entities which we are taking, the reactants, they convert them into the products. So that is the reason these laws are important. We are going to start with the first law of conservation of mass. It was given by a French chemist called Lavoisier. So it says that in all the physical and chemical changes, the total mass of reactants is equal to that of products. It also says that matter can neither be created nor be destroyed. So basically it means that there is no increase or decrease in the total mass of matter during a chemical change or a physical change. That is the law of conservation of mass. Okay, so I hope this is clear for you. I am sure you have read about it before. Your second law is law of constant composition or law of definite proportions. This law was given by a French chemist Proust. It says that a chemical compound is always found to be made up of the same elements combined together in the fixed proportion by mass. For what it means is, if I take sample of pure water in say Baroda, and if I take the sample of pure water say in some any other country, or maybe from some any other city, the proportion of hydrogen and oxygen in that pure water is always going to be the same. That is 1 by 8 of mass. The proportion by mass is 1 by 8, because hydrogen is 2 and oxygen is 16. So the mass of the proportion of mass of hydrogen and oxygen becomes 1 by 8. So basically what this law says is, for any same compound, it is always going to have the elements combined together in the fixed proportion by mass. Okay, so let's go to another law of multiple proportions. Law of multiple proportions was given by Dalton, and it says that when two elements combine to form chemical compounds, then the masses of one of the elements which combine with the fixed mass of other bear a simple ratio to one another. Basically, it has many examples. For example, let's say sulfur forms two oxides, sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide. In sulfur dioxide, some 32 parts by mass of sulfur combined by 32 parts by mass of oxygen. But in sulfur trioxide, the mass of sulfur and oxygen increases slightly. So what it says is the ratio in which these elements are going to combine in more than, if they are forming more than one chemical compound, it is going to bear a ratio, a simple ratio. For example, in sulfur dioxide, the mass ratio will be 1 by 1. In sulfur trioxide, it is going to be almost 2 by 3. So that is what this law says. If two elements are combining to form more than one compound, for example SO2 and SO3 in case of sulfur and oxygen, the ratio of masses of those elements are always going to be remain fixed. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's go to the next law. It is the law of reciprocal proportions. It was given by Richter in 1792. This law says that the ratio of masses of two elements A and B, I want you to concentrate here. It's slightly tricky, but it's very simple. So the ratio of masses of two elements A and B, which can combine separately with a fixed mass of the third element C, is either the same or some multiple ratio of the masses in which A and B directly combine with each other. For example, I want you to take an example of hydrogen, sulfur and oxygen. For example, see, hydrogen and oxygen, they can combine individually with the element sulfur, right? So hydrogen will form hydrogen sulfide H2S and sulfur will form SO2. Also, they can combine with each other forming H2O. That is what it says, that all the ratios in which the masses of A and B are going to combine directly, or the ratio of masses of A with C and B with C are going to be constant. So that is what this law means. Maybe I'll keep a slide of these examples in the next presentation. So this is the last law in the law of chemical combinations. It is also called Gay-Lussac's law of combining volumes or Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volumes. Basically, Gay-Lussac had studied a number of chemical reactions which occurred in gases. So basically, it was not clear at the time how the gases used to react chemically with each other, in what amount did they react, how to measure a particular amount of gaseous reactant, and of course the product that was formed. That was the reason he came up with this law, which says that when gases react together, they always do so in volumes which bear a simple ratio to one another. Basically, it says that whenever your reactants are gases, they are always going to react with each other in simple ratios and to the volumes of the products. So it also says that the volume of reactants and the volume of products is also going to remain a simple ratio if these are also gases. So if the reactants are gases and the products are gases, there is going to be a constant simple ratio among the reactants and among the reactants and products, provided all the measurements of volumes are done under similar conditions of temperature and pressure. I hope this is clear to you. The last topic in this presentation. So let's start with Dalton's atomic theory. At that time, to describe the structure of matter, which could explain about the facts about atoms, molecules, compounds, mixtures which reacted chemically with each other to form different molecules, Dalton had come up with a theory which we call Dalton's atomic theory. It is composed of 8 postulates, and these are very simple postulates which we are going to understand. At that point of time, this was the only theory which gave an idea about how chemically atoms used to react with each other, how they might have looked like at that point of time. So this is a very important theory. The first point is matter is made up of extremely small indivisible particles called atoms. So it says that any kind of matter is going to be composed of very small particles which are called atoms, and they cannot be further divided into any subatomic particles. The second point says that atoms of the same element are identical in all respects, that is shape, size and mass. For example, if I suppose take a sample of any compound, any element, say iron, from one sample, and if I take a sample of iron from, say, another block of iron, the atoms of iron are always going to be identical no matter from wherever I take it. The source can be anything, but the element iron will have same types of atoms in all respects. Shape, size, mass, chemical reactivity, everything are going to remain same. The third point is atoms of different elements have different masses, sizes, and they have different chemical properties. So once the element changes, the mass, the size, and the different the chemical properties, everything will change with the change in element, because every element is different than another. So that is the reason we'll have different properties. Atoms of different or same elements combine together to form compound atoms, which are also called molecules. This we discussed in the second slide today also. So for example, hydrogen can chemically combine with the same atom hydrogen to form an H2 molecule. It can also combine with a chlorine molecule to give you HCl, which is how it is going to combine with different elements to form what molecules. Now, the fifth point, when atoms combine with one another to form compound atoms, they do so in simple whole number ratios such as 1 is to 1, 2 is to 1, and so on. So we can always find the ratio in which the two or more than two maybe chemical reactants are going to combine to form a compound. Sixth point is atoms of two elements can combine in different ratios to form more than one compound. Just as we discussed about sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide, so in SO2 the combining ratio of S and O is 1 is to 2. In SO3 the combining ratio is 1 is to 3. Make sure, see, I when I discussed about SO2 and SO3 in the previous slides, I was discussing about the mass of sulfur and oxygen involved. So when I'm going to involve masses, it is going to be the mass of sulfur and mass of oxygen involved in SO2, and similarly for SO3. When I'm talking about the combining ratio, I'm going to talk about the atoms involved of S and O in both the compounds. So this is going to be different, so keep a note of that. The seventh point is an atom is the smallest particle that takes part in a chemical reaction. In other words, whole atoms rather than fraction of atoms take part in the reaction. So basically what it says is whenever a chemical reaction takes place, the atom is going to take part in that very form it is present. It is not going to break up in small fractions to take part. So atom is always going to be the smallest particle. The eighth point is similar on the similar lines, an atom can neither be created nor be destroyed. All right, I think this is going to be clear to you. If not, again I am repeating, we'll discuss these things and you don't need to worry about it. If you have any doubts, you can just jot them down and we'll discuss them. You don't need to worry about them. Let's proceed to the others. So of course, I'm sure you might have realized that there were several limitations to Dalton's atomic theory, and we are going to discuss the limitations. It was basically, as I mentioned before, also, his theory was the first theory that gave us an idea about how atoms might be reacting to form compounds. It gave a it gave an idea to the people who were working in this field how the study of matter could be taken up, how the reactions might be taking place, and that is the reason it was very important. It is still considered very important. Now the limitations of Dalton's atomic theory, these came later on, and the scientists who worked in the regarding finding the structure of atom or finding those subatomic particles as we know about them, they eventually found out that Dalton's atomic theory had a certain limitations, and with time they brought up these limitations. Of course, these are very important, and we'll look at them. So the first limitation is it could explain the laws of chemical combination by mass, but it failed to explain the law of gaseous volumes. So basically, it tells us about how atoms can combine in whole number ratios. It can tell us about how the simple ratios of reactants is going to be in whole numbers, but it does not take into account how the gaseous reactants react and form products. All right. It could not explain why atoms of different elements have different masses, sizes, valencies, etc. Now, again, I am pointing this out. At that time, he did not know about the subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons. These days, we are getting even more particles, more subatomic particles. So, if we don't know about the number of protons, electrons, and all those subatomic particles, we cannot explain why different elements will have different sizes, valencies, and different masses. He could only tell based on maybe his experiments that different elements will have different chemical properties, but he could not explain why. Okay. The third point is, why do atoms of same or different elements combine at all to form molecules? He could not understand, or maybe he could not devise a way to understand why atoms were reacting. He could not tell why two atoms can combine chemically to form any other molecule. The reason why atoms combine to form molecules is because the energy of free atoms is much higher than those of the combined molecules. Thus, the lower the energy, more stable the molecule is. That is the reason free atoms always tend to combine to form molecules, so that they can have lower energy and hence become stable. So this point Dalton's atomic theory could not explain. Okay. The fourth point is, what is the nature of binding force between atoms and molecules, which accounts for the existence of matter in three states: solids, liquids, and gases. The theory could not explain the type of forces that existed between the atoms and the molecules, because of which the matter could exist in the three solid, liquid, and gaseous states. It could not explain why the intermolecular distances and intermolecular forces govern the states of solid, liquid, and gases, and that is the reason this is also one of the shortcomings. The fifth point is, it makes no distinction between the ultimate particles of an element or a compound. So ultimate particles, by this it means the again you should go back to the second slide what I talked about. When I am going to talk about an element, I am going to talk about its atoms. When I am going to talk about a compound, I am going to talk about its molecules. So it does not give any specific distinction between the atoms of element and the molecules of compound, how they are going to be, how they are going to exist, how they are going to react, if at all, and so on and so forth. I hope the limitations of Dalton's theory are clear to you. Now, based on these limitations and the theory that Dalton gave, various chemists had came up, and they actually consolidated all these limitations and Dalton's atomic theory into a new theory which they called modified atomic theory. It is very important because this seems to have lesser number of limitation, and it is mostly complete in itself, and it makes clear actually takes care of all the problems and all the limitations that were there in the Dalton's atomic theory. We'll go one by one. So the first point is atom is no longer considered to be indivisible. It has been found that an atom has complex structure. It is made up of a number of small particles, of which the important ones are electrons, protons, and neutrons. See, there are many other subatomic particles, but we generally don't talk about them because the chemistry of reactions and chemical reactions, they mostly revolve around the electrons, protons, and neutrons. So basically, this is the reason the first postulate is not very correct. According to Dalton's theory, it is not considered as an indivisible particle anymore. All right, after the discovery of electrons. See, Dalton gave his atomic theory in 1808. So at that time, nobody knew that atom might be having so many particles inside it, and there might be a complex, structure of atom inside it. So that is the reason nobody knew that it was indivisible at his time. Okay, so we'll go with the second point. Um, Atoms of the same element may have different atomic masses. So basically, this point is regarding the isotopes. I'm sure you have heard about isotopes in your ninth class. Uh, See, hydrogen has three isotopes. It can have atomic masses of 1, 2, and 3 atomic mass units. AMU stands for atomic mass units. That is this happens as a result of different number of neutrons present in the nucleus of an atom, and this is a natural process. It happens sometimes that because of some reasons an atom can exist in more than one form. That is the reason it has a variety of different atomic masses. So this point also was not very much valid in case of Dalton's atomic theory, and such atoms are called isotopes. I'm sure you know about it now. The third point is atoms of different elements may have different atomic masses. For example, atoms of calcium and argon have the same atomic mass of 40 atomic mass units. So it so basically this does not happen very frequently. This is not a very common phenomenon, but it does happen, and at that time maybe he had not known about these elements, so he could not give an exception of isobars. Isobars are those different elements which possess same atomic mass. So calcium and argon, calcium has an atomic number of 20, argon is 18, and they both have same atomic mass unit. So this he should have considered in his theory had he known about it. So since he did not know, we had to put an exception. So that law again is not very much valid. This is a more clear explanation. So atoms of different elements, they may have same atomic masses. Okay, again I am repeating this is not a very common phenomenon. All right, so we proceed to the next point. The ratio in which the different atoms combine with one another may be fixed and integral, but they may not always be simple. Sometimes what happens, the ratios in which elements combine is not a very clear ratio. Sometimes they even react in fractions, which we cannot explain why, but it is just happening and we have to accept it that way. So that is the reason. For example, this is a very simple example. Cane sugar has a formula of C12H22O11. So the ratio becomes 12 is to 22 is to 11. Now we cannot reduce this ratio any further. That is the reason we call it is not simple anymore. Is it clear? But the good point is this ratio is always going to remain constant. There is no other way cane sugar molecule can have any other chemical formula. So the good point is it is going to remain constant. That is what Dalton had also said, but it is not a simple ratio. I hope you understand what it means. Okay. So the fifth point is atom is the smallest particle that takes part in a chemical reaction. This is basically, again, I had mentioned it when I was discussing Dalton's atomic theory also. Although it is made up of other subatomic particles like electrons, protons, and neutrons, still atom as a whole is going to react in a chemical reaction. In no way the electrons, protons or the neutrons are going to come out of the atom and take part in the reaction. Atom will always react as one complete unit. Okay, so this is always fixed. Atom is no longer indestructible. His last point, in Dalton's atomic theory, was an atom can neither be created nor be destroyed. We can destroy an atom and we can convert it from one form to another by carrying out nuclear reactions. Okay, so atom of an element can be changed into another, and this is, I am sure you have heard about it in the nuclear fission and fusion reactions. There are two types of reactions in which an atom can be changed into another. One is the nuclear fission reaction. Fission reaction means where a larger atom splits into two or more smaller atoms, and a nuclear fusion reaction where or more than two smaller atoms combine to form a larger atom. So that is how an atom can be converted into one from one form to another. So it is no longer indestructible. Now, this is the complete Dalton's atomic theory that I have discussed. I want you to at least note down these points and start reading them. If you don't have the books, I can also recommend you downloading your books from CBSE websites. And in the next presentation, we'll be taking up mole concept, and that's how we are going to proceed. This is all for today. Thank you.